There's a lot of the like contradictory pieces, right? Like they care, but it's also really hurtful and all this stuff. How have you had to reconcile these ideas just on your own, like walking around as yourself?
It's interesting for me is so again, growing up socialized male, and my family is still seeing me as that. They're not even beginning to embrace me as a woman. There is a sense in which it's like I want to confront that, and I want to be like, look, this is what's going on, and I want us to like tackle it. But there is also like, my parents are really conservative evangelical Christian, and my dad's actually a pastor. And so his whole life is like wrapped up in this identity of like what is right and wrong. And I just have no sense of like them like ever getting to understand that, you know, like I have an autonomy of my body and I can choose, right? And for them, it's like, oh, you were born a certain way and you have to be this. What I've had to do is just make a clear boundary around even talking about it, because if I open up the conversation, then it becomes this like religion, then it becomes like Bible, then it becomes way more than like just my body. It becomes like your doctrine, your beliefs, your dogma. What had to happen for me is like, oh, actually, let's just not talk about this at all, and let's just like watch the Laker game, you know, like let's just chill and like do something and like not talk about that. And so there is a huge rift, and like we're not actually meeting eye to eye on like deep, intimate levels, but also I just don't sense that they even have capacity for that. And I get my emotional support from other people, right? And I just think of my family as, okay, this is my family. We can hang out on holidays, and we don't fight. And actually, me making that boundary was the confrontation. Was like, look, if you can't understand or accept, let's just not talk about it at all. And let's just like be in space together. You know, like let's not fight. And so my dad respected that, and because it's on the same side, it's like if I gave him a door to open it up, he'll just like tell me about his religion, his beliefs, and I'm like, I don't want to talk about that. Like, you're not going to see me or your granddaughter if this is all you want to talk about. I'm not going to come around. Why would I want to be here? We've made that boundary, and it's worked for the last couple of years. Which, yeah, it'd be great if they supported me and, you know, properly gendered me and didn't call me by my legal birth name, but I just don't think that they'll get to that point. So I've kind of like made it like, okay, this is the next best option.
Well, it's kind of interesting though, because I feel like it's something that folks who are like older generations can understand, because it puts the family first.
We could either fight about this the rest of our lives, or we could just like find a happy medium to like be here. And I don't expect it of them anymore. It's a different story about my siblings, because they're like our age and they still have that struggle. And that's a whole other story. There's
a part of me that wonders, like, being around them is still, you're still you, and you're still in a way like educating them.
Just by my presence. Yeah, I don't hide it. It's not like I'm like, oh, I need to take my makeup off. I'll go full beat, you know? In a dress, everything. I even got like my titties done, and like no one said anything, you know? My presence there, merely presence, is like, oh, this is an educational moment for them, whether or not they want to accept it. It's like, I'm here, I exist. And the whole thing about it is like, trans people it's not a debate. Like, we exist. It's not a debate about what's right or wrong. It's like, I am. That's just what it is. And so I put myself in that space to assert that.
Charlie agrees.
And they just have to figure that out.
I love that you brought up boundaries. That's been a hard one for me. I've actually been thinking about this, about how, like, do our bodies belong to us in the eyes of our parents, right? Like, no, your body is part of this other thing that, like, we don't even define. Like, it came down to us, and now we're passing it on to you, and you need to ascribe to me trying to set a boundary of like, no, this is me, that's you. Like, we can be separate and still be okay, and like that doesn't have to mean anything, but it's always taken very like a challenge, or like that I'm trying to pull away from them, but it's like I'm actually trying to stay close to you. By creating this boundary where you can't just tell me what I need to do with my body or what's right or wrong about my body. That's been a big struggle so far.
Boundaries are hard. Boundaries are hard. And again, I think because there's such a focus on the like familial aspect, and that like everyone has to be in everyone's business, you know, like all that chismes. Everyone has to know everything. And like the choices that make sense for us don't always make sense for everyone else, and so it's just it becomes like everyone else's business to decide what was right for us. And it's like, but I'm cool, like I'm chilling.
Yeah, and I think you brought up the idea of ownership, right? Like, and I think in Filipino families, I don't know, I feel like my parents take it personally that I've made choices for myself that aren't theirs.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like offensive to them that I would make my own choices.
You aren't what they wanted you to be.
Exactly.
Right.
Were all our parents immigrants? Or
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's like that first generation.
Yeah.
Kind of like,
I'm technically 1.5, I believe,
Okay.
because I was born in the Philippines, but
okay,
I
you came here at a young
was
age.
like 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a huge difference too. It's just
Yeah.
like, oh, you brought us here and now we live completely different lives.
Right.
But you expect us to have the same values that you did in a whole different country.
Right.
Yeah,
right?
like my siblings, we're 4. I'm the youngest of 4, and my siblings were all born in the
Oh,
Philippines.
wow.
They came here when they were like maybe 16,
Oh,
18, and 17.
Okay.
So I was pretty much the only child growing up in
Okay.
America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My parents instilled in me like, okay, you have to grow up as a Filipino child, but born in America. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Because the way he grew up, the way my siblings grew up, like they want me to be like that.
Right.
The hardest part for me to reconcile was gender. You know, obviously I was born female. I have 2 older brothers, and they could do anything. And, you know, I just have this vivid memory of being like 7 years old and wanting to mow the lawn. I was like, I really want to do it. The machine looks cool. Like, it looks fun, you know? And they were like, no, you're not strong enough. You can't do that.
Oh, wow.
Your brother is the only one who can do it. And I was so livid. And, you know, from that point on, I was so hyper aware of anytime someone tried to say I couldn't do it because my body was, female. Like, I personally had to reject gender altogether because I was like, no, I'm not going to be a part of any of that. You're not going to try and tell me with however I look, whatever, you know, that I can't do something.
It's interesting. I had the same on the opposite side of the spectrum, right? Was like as a little kid, my brothers, I have 2 older brothers that were very hyper masculine into sports, and they expected me to do the same thing. And so my brothers were always like trying to train me to be like a basketball player, and it's like, okay, I enjoyed it to some extent, but I didn't have that competitiveness that they all had, and I didn't have this like drive to like always win in this like hyper masculine way. I just kind of, you know, I was like, okay, this is what everyone does, I'm into it. And then at the same time though, anytime I was like soft or anytime I was like sensitive, I was totally made fun of for being sensitive or for crying or for like feeling my emotions, right? So I had to be very masculine in a way that like didn't even fit like who I wanted to be. I don't even know where this memory comes from, but one of my grandmas during Christmas had given me a makeup set when I was a kid.
Oh.
Maybe they just saw, maybe she just knew, right?
That
She
knew
that
just
wisdom,
saw.
yeah.
But like, for whatever reason, they took it away from me, and I was like, I remember crying because it's like I still wanted this, you know. But it was just a weird. I had no clue where that came from, but that memory just popped up.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said about not feeling your feelings too. That's just like nobody should be feeling their feelings.
Right.
It's just very anti-feminine,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Right.
just
Sure.
across the board. Like,
Yeah.
It is
Any-
very anti-feminine.
Yeah.
When I was younger, when my sister came to the States, she wouldn't let me hang out with my brothers. She wanted me to be very girly. And I was like a tomboy girl. I loved like boy things, you know. But when she came, she was like, "No, you can't play video games. Like girls don't
That's so
do that."
interesting.
I'm like, why?
I had a weird confusing thing about playing with girl things and boy things too, because I grew up with 3 boys.
Yeah,
Like
I
our
grew
2
up with
cousins
all
and my brother.
guys.
And like so they always wanted to like play video games and like wrestle and like punch each other and like and kick each other in the balls was like the thing. And in kindergarten
Not that I missed
doing
that,
it.
Peter. I was much older than they were.
yeah, so she didn't play with us. But then I remember when we moved here, our neighbor became my best friend growing up, and it was the girl, and like I was like so happy to have like a girl playmate. And then I remember when I started playing with her more, all the boys would be like, "Oh, like you're such a girl now," and I'm like, "I am a girl."
Right. Even as a young kid, it's just like what you play with. It's not even
it's
really
already being put onto us.
Exactly.
right. And then the language of it comes through,
Yeah.
and how they try to create that boundary for us.
Yeah.